open gym was blood sport. I'm a 14-year-old skinny kid. There was a guy named Curtis McFall, right? He was a senior, buddy of mine to this day, who was a sponsor for me, right? They were only picking the old guys, and every time he would say, give me 4 old guys, and I'm taking Gary, right? And I would be way out of my league. I'm being out physical, but they made sure that they were going to vouch for me, even when I couldn't vouch for myself until I came into my own.
All right, y'all, welcome to another episode of the Bigger the Food podcast. I am your host, Apollo, and I promise I say this every time we talk to somebody amazing, that we talk about amazing entrepreneurs and community leaders in our community here in Oklahoma City or even beyond. In the podcast, we talk about the journey. We go into talking more about who they are, more than what they do. But as you'll see in this conversation today, the things about what he does connects, who he is connects on the things that he does. So today's podcast is my frat brother Gary Jones. We are on the campus of the University of Oklahoma in the Price School of Business here. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm honored.
No problem. So like I said, we start off with asking just a simple question. Who is Gary?
Oh, wow. That's it's simple yet a little bit complex.
Okay.
Who is Gary? Gary is a father. Gary is a DEI professional. Gary is a minister. Gary is a former student athlete, a former college coach. But Gary's just a normal guy. And I think everything that I find myself doing, everything that I find my hands involved with, are an extension of my life experiences, of what's important to me, of the things I've been exposed to, and what really, I think just tugs at my heart. Okay.
So where's Gary from?
Yeah, so Gary was born in Morgan City, Louisiana, but my family moved when I was less than a year old, and so I lived my life. I was raised in Benton Harbor, Michigan, southwest corner of the state, maybe 20, 30 minutes from South Bend, Indiana. But definitely a Michigan guy. Came to Oklahoma many knees and many pounds ago, about 20 years ago, to play basketball at Oklahoma Christian by way of a junior college, Southwestern Christian College in Terrell, Texas. Got recruited to Oklahoma and got here to play ball.
All right, so hold on. So now you're starting to talk about what you do.
Yeah, I got you.
Sometimes it's hard for us to not talk about what we do. Because oftentimes, especially when you are pursuing something greater than yourself, it becomes easy to talk about it because people also ask us. Now, I want to go back to, you were from Louisiana.
Yeah.
Born in Louisiana.
Yeah.
Ends up in Michigan. Do you remember that transition? What do you remember about being one place or maybe traveling back to Louisiana, coming back? Do you remember anything about those transitions?
Yeah, so obviously, the initial transition, I was way too young, but I do remember those two different worlds and what balancing those two different worlds were like. My father's family is still in Louisiana for the most part, and so we would go down maybe every other summer. I mean, that was like a 20-some-hour drive from Michigan, loading up in the Astro van and driving down to Louisiana to see my grandparents. And it would be such a different world when we would get there. I don't want to say culture shock, but it was just very, very different. Than the community in which I was raised in at that time. It seemed like everybody in that neighborhood when we got to Louisiana was family, was cousins. Everything was, play outside in the street. Even the cuisine was different. The only time I've ever had shrimp on pizza. I remember being a kid and at Pizza Hut, it was just like pepperoni. Like it was just a regular thing there.
At Pizza Hut, they're putting shrimp on pizza.
Absolutely. And this had to be like early 90s. I'm talking like 92, 93, being in Louisiana was the first time that I ever saw where the sun was shining and it was raining on one side of the street and not on the other. But just a lot of experiences, man. But it was very different. We would look forward to it because we didn't get to go, a lot because it was so far. But definitely can remember contrasting those two different worlds.
So as a kid, what age was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, this would be roughly 8, 9, 10 years old.
Okay, so 8, 9, 10 years old, before preteen era, and you start to recognize how different it was.
Oh, absolutely.
So in Michigan, there wasn't going outside. There wasn't as much freedom. But then when you go back to where you were actually born and where family is, the culture is different. So you said the word cultural shock. Now put it in context of you being a 8, 9, 10-year-old child at that time. Do you remember how freeing or not freeing it was?
Yeah, it's a great question.
To go back to where you were born and be like, man, we get to ride our bikes, we do all this stuff. We don't get to do this at home.
Yeah, so one thing I want to be clear about, we did have some outdoor, we ride bikes, play ball outside and all that. One of the things that was very different though is that literally the entire street, 2 or 3 streets was family. Right. And so, back home it was you can only go so far, then come back to the neighborhood. There you were at somebody's house.
Mile away from home.
Yeah, a mile away from home.
Yeah.
You couldn't go anywhere down there, and my dad's nickname was Bread. So people would be like, "You Bread, son," right? I'm like, who is that? What is that about? Yeah. Right. It was very different. One of the things I can recall about the culture difference or culture shock was I spoke very different than anybody down there. You were reminded that you weren't from around there. You were reminded that you were going home eventually. Simple things like going to the park to go play ball or at the local recreation center. As a basketball player, I go in and play, and I'm just playing. I think nothing of it. But even then, you weren't from around there, so you couldn't be on this team, or you couldn't win or stay on the court when you won, right? Because you don't live here, different kind of rules. So it was very different. One of the other things I can remember being a young child too was just some of my father's interactions. It's the first time I ever was made aware that there was a time where we had to get off the sidewalk, when white people would come by. My father was raised in Louisiana, so some of those things were embedded in him.
So how did you become aware of that? Did you see that happen? Was that your dad's normal behavior,
I think it was his
or
normal
was it storytelling?
Yeah, no. This is where I can't recall if we're coming out of a restaurant or coming out of a store, but I do remember it was the same encounter with seeing the rain on one side and not on the other. And he had kind of stepped down, and I asked him what was that about, and I think it was just his natural. I was at home. This was my survival mechanism. And he would then explain kind of the way things used to be. And I was blown away because I'd never known anything of that nature, at least at that age. And so I started to kind of open my eyes to the fact that my father's lived experience is very different than what my lived experience had been up to that point.
So why did they move?
Yeah, great question. So my mother's family, my dad's family is from Louisiana. My mother's from Omaha. My mother's father is from Senatobia, Mississippi. And so with the Great Migration, a lot of his family moved up Memphis, Chicago, and he went on a little bit further. My hometown was only about an hour and 15 minutes east of Chicago. And so my mother agreed as a part of when they got married, she agreed to go live in Louisiana, but she wanted to raise her kids by her family. And so that's why they moved up to Michigan. Okay.
So already in my head, I'm already thinking about the connection between then and today. So I'm trying my best to fast forward. Because when you start to peel things back, you don't recognize how those previous life experiences have influenced you.
Absolutely.
What you do today. So, become a teenager, started getting really active. So you recognized the difference of being in Louisiana. Did you recognize any differences or how was it for you as a child or a youth growing up in Michigan then?
Yeah, I enjoyed my experiences. Benton Harbor is a different place, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. And so if you're not familiar with that area, it's pretty interesting because there's a bridge that separates two towns, Benton Harbor, Michigan, and St. Joe, Michigan. We're right there on Lake Michigan. Benton Harbor is predominantly, and when I say predominantly, I'm talking 99% plus a black town.
Okay.
And St. Joe is predominantly 99% plus a white town.
Okay.
And it's interesting because in hindsight, looking back, it was almost as if, the communities were stuck in the 50s in some ways,
right.
just the separation. But there were some safeties that I grew up with in Benton Harbor that I didn't have in St. Joe. If we wanted to go to the YMCA to play basketball, we had to go to St. Joe. And so you had to drive differently. You had to ride together in groups. You couldn't date a girl from St. Joe. There was just a different culture, right? I grew up playing basketball, baseball, football, soccer. My first youth league experiences in football and soccer were in St. Joe because they had the leagues. And I can just remember even being at a pool party, maybe 12 years old, only black kid on the soccer team. And I was the only kid who wasn't allowed to get in the pool. I didn't think nothing of it, I wasn't a great swimmer, so I just didn't really,
right.
But there definitely have been some experiences where I could see that as a kid. But again, in a lot of ways, Benton Harbor was my protection. It was my safety net. I never had to worry about being anything other than who I was. Never had to worry about not being celebrated, for who I was. And so, as weird as that dynamic was, right, with those two worlds almost never intertwining unless they had to. We were rivals in sports, obviously, but there was such a safety net and a serious investment, I think, in our lives on the Benton Harbor side of the bridge that we never felt like we were missing anything by being in Benton Harbor.
So, almost like your dad, growing up in the segregated times, you lived not in segregated time, not in the era, right?
Right.
But you still lived in a city that had a different world from each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things,
but you still had access to
and that's one thing I think that I have to credit my parents for, and not only my parents, but those who were part of my village growing up, whether it was men in my church or in the community, coaches, whatnot, it was made very clear to me at a young age that although, we grew up this way, you're going to have every access to that community. And I was prepared for, Du Bois calls it the double consciousness, right? I was the kid who lived on this side of the bridge, but I could navigate the other side of the bridge as well. And what I didn't know then was it was preparing me for life, for what, for just everything that I have my hands on now. But again, 6, 7, 8 years old, being the only one in a lot of those spaces, and proud of it, and never thought that I didn't belong, never thought that I didn't fit in, because I was prepared for it,
Right. And I relate to that too. There were only 11 black folks in my graduating class of 222. So Duncan is predominantly black, and where I actually lived in Duncan wasn't predominantly black, but on the hill, that's where the black folks lived. That's where my grandparents lived, all black. So I went to where I was going to school. At one time, I was either the only black person in school or one of 4. But everybody else ended up leaving, so I was often the only black student there. But it did. There were often times I was the only person in something, and I think growing up I didn't care for it too much because I couldn't wait till school was over.
Right.
Because I was going down to my grandma's house. I could ride the bike. I could do all that. I could explore. But on the flip side of that, my cousins would always have something to say, right? But I was like, man, I want to be, with my cousins. I want to be over here. But then, as I grew older, I started to recognize the privilege I had by having different experiences.
Yeah, you definitely learn how to navigate the world, and I think it's a good thing that we don't know that we're learning to navigate the world. Otherwise, I think the task would seem overwhelming or daunting.
Or you might not even try.
Right, absolutely. But we're simply living life, right? I was just crazy enough, and I was raised this way, just crazy enough to believe any opportunity that I wanted to have, I can go have, right? I know looking back, I was in a whole lot of spaces that I didn't belong, right? But I was going to be prepared. I was going to be articulate. I was going to be the best at anything that I tried to put my hands on. And again, I think that some of the fearlessness came from being raised in Benton Harbor. You couldn't tell us we couldn't do anything. We were just crazy enough to believe that I belonged in those spaces. I can recall there's a big pageant back on. This probably sounds terrible saying this as a 40-plus-year-old man. Big Blossom Time pageant. That was a big parade, and it's kind of like this Rose Bowl deal. But it's a big deal, and people represent from all over Southwest Michigan. I didn't even know there was, there's a big Miss Blossom Time. I didn't even know there was a Mr. Blossom Time deal. They asked me to go do it. I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. Right. And you go and, you walk in the room with 50 plus people from the state and you realize you're one of 2 or 3 that look like you, right? And you quickly begin to realize as well, I'm probably more prepared for this than any of you guys. Right. And so you start to see the politics that come with life and opportunity and things like that. And so, yeah, definitely I can look back at my teenage years and see a lot of opportunities that kind of set the table for the day.
And I hear you say when you're like, you felt prepared or confident going those places. I hear you say that. But how did you get to that place of having that confidence? Because you don't just get that as a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid. Like there had to be some nurturing or maybe core family conditions or expectations that led you to the place of confidence.
Yeah, that's a great point there. So I'd say I point to 3 areas: family, church, and I'd say community. I grew up in a space. I'm the oldest of 3. 5 years between my sister and I, and about almost 9 between my brother and I. And oftentimes as old as kids, sometimes you're the guinea pig, right? you're going to be in everything and do everything. Yeah. And so, but also very close knit family, kind of like yours, with cousins and everything like that. And again, just raised that you can do absolutely anything, right? I was raised in a family where everybody cheered you on. I grew up in the church. I'm a preacher's kid as well, right? And so I was given an opportunity to be involved and to be a leader. At a very young age, whether it was with a youth group or speaking publicly in church or things of that nature.
Now, were you nurtured to do that, or is that something? I would say, I'm trying to say it in a way that doesn't sound like child abuse.
Was I forced?
Right.
Yeah, no, never. I'm the guy who still can't believe that I'm somebody's preacher because I swore I never would be one. Right? No, it was just. It came naturally to me, right? If the youth group is doing something and you need a spokesperson on a project, I'll say it, I'll do it, right? It just came naturally to me. And so those opportunities were there within the church context.
But you were young, so was it really naturally, or you had the environment that encouraged you to do the things, encouraged you to try, and then after a while it became just a part of the expectation?
Yeah, I think
it was part of your personality.
It was a little bit of both. There was definitely an environment that welcomed it, that pushed it. I never felt compelled to do anything growing up, especially in church. This was just the norm. My church was also very much a place where when I was a kid, the teenage and young adult men were very much involved. They were allowed to be so I wanted to be that. I saw it. I wanted to be. I couldn't wait till I got old enough to be involved, right? So there's the family piece, the church piece, and then the community. Man, some of the coaches I've had in life growing up, especially back home in Benton Harbor, some of the greatest men in the world, man. There were community leaders who, teachers who would say to my parents, "Hey, I think this young man is special. Let's do what we need to do to make it happen." And so I am very much aware that preparation comes from the.
That is, from what you shared at the beginning of the podcast, that led to you coming to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Now you go from Louisiana, crawfish and boudin and all that kind of good stuff. And basically going to the Midwest.
Right.
And then now back to the heart of America, or I don't know what we really figure out what Oklahoma is.
Oklahoma is not the Midwest.
We're not Southwest. We're not Midwest.
We're Southern Plains or something.
Yeah, we're Southern Midwest. No idea what it is. You're back to Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
But you're in Oklahoma. So, and when did you start to realize that sports is a possibility for you to get an education or do something more? When did you start to realize, like, I think I'm good enough to do something with this?
Yeah, that's That's a great question. So I began playing sports. Organized sports,
Okay.
right? Probably 7, 8 years old.
Yeah.
Basketball, baseball, soccer. Began playing football maybe around 8 or 9, and played all the way through. It was just kind of what we did.
Yeah.
Sports was really big in my hometown, especially basketball. Basketball at Benton Harbor High. If you played varsity basketball, you were a rock star in town. Town probably only had 18, 20,000 people.
Okay.
And the 12 young men on that basketball team was like Lord of all. It was crazy, man. But I would say, I think when I got to high school, the light began to go off that, okay, this might be something more than just what I enjoy, right? My parents were very adamant to make sure that it was definitely student athlete, right? Grades were very much. I always wanted to play drums. The reason why I never got to play drums because my parents was like, you got to drop a sport to play, and I'm like, I'm not quitting no sports, So anyway, get to high school and you start to see things at another level. So my senior class of guys, there were 2 major like elementary, middle school teams right in town, and we were like 2 rival teams. Got to middle school and merged, and we were just unbeatable. So our freshman year, there was a guy named Robert Whaley who was our classmate, 6'10", but he was the number 1 player in the country as a freshman. And so we started to see every college coach you can think of coming into the gym. And the light goes off for all of us that this could be something.
So what school did he play?
Yeah, so Robert ended up
Before high school.
Before high school?
Yeah.
He middle school?
Yeah, like at so what so y'all were at the same middle?
No. We were 2 different middle schools. I went to McCord, he's at King.
Okay.
So and he was a Stern Bronson guy growing up.
Okay.
I was a Bard guy growing up. So the Stern Bronson crew came together, and the Bard crew came together. Okay. And like I said, by the time we got to high school, I mean we were it was unreal. So he was no one playing the country. You started seeing all these guys come in. AU basketball is blowing up then, right? And you start to see, okay, here are some opportunities. At the same time, I'm starting to see some of the guys that I'm playing football with get some opportunities, and you're like, okay, this could really be an opportunity.
All right, but let's peel that back, because like I want you to think from the lens of where you were at that age back then, because we're talking in the adult language. Like, I saw this opportunity. Like, that's not the we talk about. So what was about, like, paint the picture for someone watching or listening where they can say, as a young person or as a parent that sees the potential, like, what does that look like in the lens of a young person?
Yeah. So as a kid, I would say 10 years old, 9, 10 years old, there was, I was glued. I knew every sport fact. I knew everything about. There was my senior year with the 2001 team, right? There was a team at our high school, the 92 and 93 team, that went undefeated. They were the first undefeated team till we came by, and all 5 of those guys either went Division I basketball or Division I football or played pro baseball.
Okay,
and they were what we wanted to be. And so when you talk about looking through the lens of a kid, right? What does that look like? It's a serious devotion. It is a serious. I don't have to tell Billy go pick up a ball and go shoot. It's hey, put that ball down. Come on in the house and clean up for dinner, right? A lot of parents, I grew up in a time where you played everything, right? That's not the case anymore. A lot of people are specializing.
And it's expensive now.
Yeah, well, it is expensive, but I would tell you there's pros and cons to both, right? If you specialize, you do have an opportunity of getting recruited in that sport. However, if you're a football player, right, or a baseball player or a track guy, those coaches tend to like kids that are multi-sport guys.
Right.
But if you're a basketball guy, that can come back to bite you because all these things are now happening year round, right? And so we didn't have that problem back then. I would play a football game on Friday night in high school, and Saturday morning be in a open gym basketball practice. It was just understood.
Yeah. But I go back to when you said about even with sports that the older guys were doing something, so you wanted to be like them.
Man.
But you also said the same thing in church.
Absolutely.
You saw older folks in the church doing something that you aspire to be. So with that, how important is it for youth to have someone to look up to that they can almost touch, like they got something close enough to them that they can model? How important is that in the developmental years for a young person?
Yeah, it's more than paramount. Mentorship and sponsorship is really, really, really important. I look back now and
qualify those. So what's
so mentorship
versus sponsorship?
Yeah, mentorship is somebody who will pull you along, who will emulate for you, who will help you out in a real tangible way. Let me demonstrate for you. Sponsorship is somebody who's going to vouch for you in some spaces that you can't get into for yourself, right? And I can see that even in my own life. With those guys, they didn't know that they were mentors for me, right? But you know, and you don't know any of these names, but the Brian Eccles, the Prentice Magruders, Corey Child, right? Those guys right now, if you go back to my hometown, they're legends, right? But in the same way, I can remember being a freshman, getting to high school, and again, we're talking about a team that was just full of D1 guys all the time. Open gym was blood sport. I'm a 14-year-old skinny kid. There was a guy named Curtis McFall, right? He was a senior, buddy of mine to this day, who was a sponsor for me, right? They were only picking the old guys, and every time he would say, give me 4 old guys, and I'm taking Gary, right? And I would be way out of my league. I'm being out physical, but they made sure that they were going to vouch for me, even when I couldn't vouch for myself until I came into my own. And that stuff is so important for young people today. It's easy for us to forget the mentorship and the sponsorship that we had. And I think it's really important that we be intentional to look back and to mentor people, to give of our own time, and to speak up for somebody else. Hey, there's a kid coming along. There's a young professional coming along. There's, you know, I think that's really important, because the other thing that I also saw in some spaces, not everybody was a mentor or a sponsor. There were some people who were threatened by a kid with some talent. You know, and you see that even now, in professional spaces. People have been there for a long time who won't vouch for you.
Yeah, so I remember that just growing up. Like, you know, I had, you know, older cousins that would, you know, make sure I had an opportunity to do something, especially Sundays playing basketball. So the ritual was, everybody get out of church, no matter what church you went to, you're going down to grandparents' house on Sycamore Street. You know, you got to hurry up and eat. And you always brought your plastic bag of clothes. Going in the back room of the den, you changed your clothes, put your clothes on. Even if I didn't, it took me years to be able to get to play. I would still put my clothes on, my shoes on. I'd go sit on the bench in Douglas School and watch them play. And then when I got there, even if it was shooting in between time, it was like, let me get on the floor between games and shoot. But when I got a chance to play, I was nervous. I was nervous. I'm out with my big cousins, and I'm out here with John and Willie and everybody else out here, and I get my chance. Man, I'm messing up, screwing up. But when I got older, I realized they understood, because I believe they talked. They understood as older people, their time's going to come, that let's make sure we give these young folks a shot.
Yeah, so there's a gentleman by the name of Charles Brock. He was one of my grandfather's best friends, went to church with us, good family friend. But I told you about those guys in the 92 team that were like rock stars, right? And he was also one of the boosters that worked the gates. And he would pick me up, take me to the games if my parents can go, but every game he would have me, one of his jobs was sweeping the floor at halftime, right? And so he would, you know, hey, you're going to sweep the floor. And I'm like, okay. Right, and I'm sweeping the floor at halftime, and to me it was the greatest honor, right? Because that meant I could go in the locker room before the game. They knew my name. I went from sweeping the floor to being a little ball boy to and
also everybody sees you.
Man, everybody got to see. Yeah, absolutely. You know,
you get on the floor. Back then, you couldn't get. Just anybody could not get on the floor, especially if you had the wrong shoes on.
Absolutely, and so then, you know, we
couldn't wear black shoes back then.
You scuff up the floor. Yeah, but it was small because I got this. Those guys, it was like, what? They just spoke to me, like they know my name. Like all those things are important to me as a kid, because it validated that these guys were people like I'm a person, and I can actually reach this level of greatness, right? That they've reached, and that was so important. And it started from sweeping the floors.
So. You start getting these opportunities to, you're understanding there's a real chance for you to do something greater with basketball. Do you remember when you started getting recruited?
Man, my recruitment was different than probably most people. So I thought that my route was actually going to be football.
Okay.
I thought my route would be football because I was almost the shortest guy on my high school basketball team at 6'1", 6'2". We were loaded, 2'6", 6'7", 6'5". My senior year, we went, I think it was like maybe 27-0 before we lost in the quarterfinals, got upset. And we were just extremely deep. At that time, NAIA schools, D2 schools, all that wasn't really popular in our area. And so for me, the easier route was going to would be football.
Okay.
At the time, I was playing receiver and some safety, and academically, I could go anywhere I wanted to go.
Okay.
And so my mindset was, I was set to go academically, go to Western, had an opportunity to walk on for football and all that stuff. And then right before I graduate, Michigan State calls, and there's a full endowed scholarship, full tuition room and board for a graduate from my high school, and nobody else was coming. And so here's an opportunity to go to school for free. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, I can just go here. I can make the team, right? End up going to Michigan State, and you realize that sports are a business. It's a machine.
Yep.
And I had to kind of get my footing, and then I made up my mind, it's about time. So tried out for the team, a basketball team there, and probably 150 guys out there, man, crazy. Made it to the final 2 or 3, and one of the things that I'll always respect about Tom Izzo was he came to myself and another guy from Saginaw and told us, man, I think you guys are good enough, but we just need bigs for practice. You're not gonna play, and so right. And we respected him for it, and so I kind of just gave up on it for another semester or so, and after that, I just kind of got the itch. Like I when you grow up playing, man, you can't get out of your system.
Yeah.
And so there was a JUCO in East Texas, Southwestern Christian College, that had recruited me amongst other schools. I want to go into a JUCO. I had 2 good enough grades. And I just called him like, hey, man, is that scholarship still there? And he's like, yeah, come on. Coach Herb Evans. And I transferred at Christmas, at semester break. My mother drove me down to Terrell, Texas, man, a little bitty old Terrell, Texas. And pulled up on campus, and it was nothing like Michigan State, man. We looked around, and my mama was like, "You sure? You want to go home, don't you?" And I had too much, I wanted to be a man. I was like, "No, too much pride. No, I'm gonna stay here." And I'll never forget, I hadn't even put my stuff in the dorm. I got out and got on the bus. The team was going to a game. I couldn't play. I hadn't enrolled yet. And we went, and I just remember on that ride to the game saying to myself, like, I should have gotten in the car with my mom and went back home, man. What am I doing? But it was one of the best things, man, that ever happened. It was really an opportunity for me to come into my own opportunity. Like I said, man, my high school team was loaded. I mean, we had 12 guys that could have started anywhere in the state. And so there I had a chance to shoot that thing as much as I wanted to. And from there, kind of almost accidentally ended up in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Explain.
So we're playing Redlands. We come up to El Reno to play, and Redlands had just won like a national championship. And so I'm like, well, I don't know what we gonna do, but I know what I'm gonna do. Played Redlands. They ended up beating us, but I played really well. I shot the ball really, really well, and ended up getting recruited to Oklahoma Christian.
Okay.
And actually wasn't coming to Oklahoma Christian. I was going somewhere else, and the coach got let go in the summer. And at the last minute decided to come. I hadn't taken a visit or anything like that, and came to Oklahoma. And probably one of the best things that ever happened in my life. I can look back and truly say that God closing some doors was the best thing that could happen for me.
Okay. So it almost seems as if you decided, I'm not gonna call them risk. You made some decisions. And the reason I say decisions versus risk, as you were talking about your experiences growing up, right? And stepping out and leading and following under older folks. It seems that the move to, at Michigan State, you were one of the last 3 out of 150 people that are on the court. So that says in itself. take the leap to go to East Texas.
Yeah.
And then from East Texas, you come to Oklahoma. They don't seem like risk to me. It almost seems like maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you had some thoughtfulness in the decision that there could be a high reward. To me, that seems different than just saying like, I'm just going to go.
Yeah, I hoped it did. You know, I'll be honest with you. So high school, I graduated top 10, 3.7, 3.8, something like that GPA. And by the time I made the decision to leave Michigan State, you know, I needed to get my grades back up too. You know, I was enjoying college life. And so going to Southwestern Christian College not only was a calculated move athletically, but also academically. Right. Because at the time they had a program there. If you graduated there, you could go to Abilene Christian for free. That was D1. I'm like, you know what? I can go here, go play ball there. Boom. It's right. But that's all risk from far away without knowing everything that goes into that. But it definitely, I definitely had to think long and hard about giving up what I knew I had. At Michigan State, just a great opportunity. There's some days I still say to myself, what happens if I stay and graduate, right? What happens if But
I said that too when I sometimes think about when I transferred from the University of Tulsa and went to Houston. Tulsa, my grades were higher, private university, very expensive, smaller classroom, they knew you. But on the flip side of that, like I did not get the social experience that I needed.
Right.
I got the social experience in Houston.
Right.
First semester, I was almost back home.
Right.
But then I go back to, but what I have these experiences if I didn't.
Oh man.
Right. Because when I left, I had one family friend. She graduated the next year.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something. So I thought about it, but I didn't understand what it meant to live in a big city like that. I was like, I'm just going. Right. And I had enough confidence in myself that I know I could do things.
Right.
But what was required of me on the other side, I had no idea.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So when you were, making these decisions and you're going to Oklahoma Christian and you graduate, where does the faith part come in here? Because you're going from a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
Definitely involved in church. Your faith is definitely solid in there. And then at some point in all of this, it becomes like, all right, I'm getting this. I also have this tugging or calling for this.
So that realization, that part of the realization comes a little bit later.
Okay.
For me, the faith in all of that was trusting that he who has begun a good work in you is going to see it all the way through, right? If I had a nickel for every time I wanted to go home when I was in East Texas, you know what I'm saying? It was just different. I'm 20 hours away. Thankfully, I had a cousin and some family there in Dallas that I could be around. I didn't go blind. I had a couple buddies who were in similar situations that went down. We all transferred together to play. But I honestly think, the more we have this conversation, some of those younger experiences probably prepared me best for this, right? Being uncomfortable nowhere. I was 20 some hours away from home, and that part didn't bother me. I wasn't longing for home. I think I was longing for just some normality, for some. I was used to Michigan State. I was used to the dorms and the college life and the big experience. And I go from 27,000 students to a couple hundred students, right? And it's a different animal. And
I went from 2,200 to 41,000.
Yeah, so it's a different animal. But I think faith also in coming to Oklahoma Christian kind of blind, right?
But is faith blind?
Is faith blind? I don't know if faith is blind. I think faith is. I don't know if I came to Oklahoma Christian by faith. I think I came to Oklahoma Christian by desperation. I don't know if that was faith. I literally had exhausted every other opportunity to go play at 4-year school. The only other opportunity I had was just in a play. It was in a place that was kind of like just, it wasn't safe for a brother. And the high school teammate that was going to go with me went somewhere else. And so I just kind of came here. I think staying here was faith, because there were some things, that happened along the way. But just truly trusting that God was going to make it work. I learned so many life lessons along the way.
Well, the reason why I say is faith blind is because, Hebrews 11:1.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't believe faith is blind, because you can't have faith without hope.
Yeah.
And because hope is that important part that helps you understand that you got to know in your mind that there is a possibility. And the faith is the part that you walk out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And the reason why I say I don't know if faith is blind, because I think in our westernized vernacular, blind often means with no sight at all. Right. And I think faith isn't necessarily without sight at all. I think faith is a reliance without using sight as the totality of how I came to this conclusion, right? I trust that God will do this because I've seen God do it before. I know the character of God. Sometimes when we think just reckless, uncalculated, stuff like that. But definitely, there were some pieces of the puzzle that I could not see before I came, but
there was enough preparation in your life,
absolutely,
that would allow you to be able to say, I can do this one. You go from family goes from one part, move to another. You by yourself are moving in the other direction of where your family moved to, but you're still closer to, your birth home.
Right.
And then you make another leap as well. So like you said, there was these experiences that allowed you to be able to say, I could do that. I'm able to do this. This doesn't sound too far stretched, although I don't know all the things.
Right.
But I know enough that I have enough personal development to do this. If I can be 20 hours away, then I can do this a little bit closer, and I can do this.
Absolutely.
And I can keep going in it, because how I understand seeing now is my eyes are just my vision. I see what's in here. So if I have not made up in my mind what it's going to be, because what I think about, what I see is going to influence how I see it through my vision, right? So that's why I say, like, when I think about, as you're talking about your story and your journey, okay, these things are adding up, they make sense, and you're building your faith. And then what many people don't know is the work that you did at Oklahoma Christian.
Yeah.
Through the speaker series. Moving back to Oklahoma, that was something I initially heard about, and then came to say, like, this to me is one of the most impactful series in the state, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Especially when you're at a predominantly white Christian university.
Absolutely.
You were dean of students?
Assistant dean of students and director of institutional diversity.
Okay, so you were at that university doing this speaker series at a place that most folks wouldn't suspect it happened.
Absolutely.
So tell the audience that's watching or listening how that idea of the speaker series started. Like, why did you want to do it? And lay the landscape on what the university environment was like in the speaker series that you created.
Yeah, so the History Speak series was something that we thought would be a one-time deal, and it was so good that we couldn't stop doing it. One of the things that I really wanted to bolster up at Oklahoma Christian was the Black History Month programming, right?
Now, what year time frame was this?
Oh, this would have been 2013, 14 maybe, is when we started the first one. I came to Oklahoma Christian, I want to say maybe 2010 or 11. Started their diversity programming from scratch. And so as we were building that out, one year I was having a conversation with my wife, and my wife oversees our Black History production at our church. And that particular year, it was on the Little Rock Nine. And she was like, hey, I know it's just crazy, but how crazy would it be if we could get the Little Rock Nine to come, the 8 of them, they're still living. I think the 8 at that time, they were still living, to come to the play. I'm like, oh, that'd be cool. I was like, well, if we do that, I can get them at the school. And then my wheels started spinning. I'm like, wait a minute. What if this thing works in the inverse? So I go to work and I pitch it to my boss, Neil Arter, who dean of students there, biggest supporter of History Speaks. Man, if it's not for him, this thing doesn't happen. And he's like, okay, I like the idea. What does it look like? What does it cost? And within a matter of probably 4 days, I've gotten a hold of Terrence Roberts from Little Rock 9 and Carlotta Walls Lanier. And I've got the pricing, we've got a date, and the school is like, okay, let's make it happen. And so the program, that's why the program was always on a Monday night, because we would bring them in on a Sunday and they'd come to the play at the church. And on Sunday night, and then Monday they're at the school all day and do the lecture that evening. So it was such a hit. It was crazy. So after it ended,
all right, come on, you kind of like escaped over it. So, he said yes. So and how many people showed up? And were you surprised with the amount of folks that showed up?
So the auditorium seats about 1,300. We figured that we need to have tickets, but I wanted to make it free. And so it was free, but you had to have a ticket to have a seat. And so we put this out there, we're doing this. And, oh, man, I say in maybe 3 weeks' time, all the tickets are gone.
Wow.
And we hadn't really even gotten tickets to our students yet. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? So we, you kind of got the overflow thing going. They show up. It was so crazy. Terrence Roberts actually guest lectured in a class that day. But they show up. We have people who came from as far as Dallas, Houston, Little Rock, Wichita for that event, and they didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. In my mind, you'll both give a mini lecture. I'll moderate a Q&A. We'll just see what happens. I hope I have a job the next day. That's kind of my thought process, right?
And then too, they're free tickets.
They're free
so
tickets.
You don't know if people are going to show up. You don't know
if people are going to show up or not. The other part of it was they agreed to. They wanted to sign autographs and take photos afterwards. Okay, let's see how that goes. And so I got with our book store on campus, ordered some books so people could buy them and have them signed and all that good stuff. And it goes well. I mean, it goes well. The lecture ends, and they're already out signing autographs, and it takes me at least another 45 minutes to get from the stage to where they are because people are stopping me. It's crazy. My wife and I take them back to the hotel that night and spend another hour or two with them, and we're walking back to the car like we actually pulled this off. This is crazy, right? And I get to work the next day, and I've got administration like, hey, so next year, what are we doing? And I'm like, huh? Right? I mean, we had coverage from the newspaper and KLCO and all these things. One of the things I will say that I thought was interesting to me was there were some other media outlets that I went to on the front end to publicize this who wanted no parts of it, and I thought it was interesting. One of the things that I enjoyed was that I did it without them. So from that, where do we go next? Right.
So let's hold on. Hold on, because you created something. I'm sure there was this anxiety of, are they going to show up?
Absolutely. People
are showing up, and it's not the people that I thought was going to show up. Right. So people are showing up. Like you were like, this is supposed to go to one audience of people, just being safe. Why do you think it spread like wildfire the way it did the first time? From a position of, now you're an administrator, it's marketing, it's branding, it's at Oklahoma Christian. Right. And why do you think people showed up the way they did? What did you do looking back? Like, I think this was why the response was the way it was that time.
I think we offered them a chance to do something they had never done before. A lot of people knew about the Little Rock 9. You had read about it. I'd say maybe even a third of the demographic that showed up lived through that era, right? They were their contemporaries, but you never got to see them or touch them. They were they were a story in a history book. They were a lecture that I heard about. And to have the opportunity to actually look at these people and touch these people and to hear from these people, right, was just something I think that was mind-blowing to a lot of people. One of the other things that we did strategically was we hit schools, we hit elementaries, we hit high schools. Hey, here's a hands-on learning opportunity, right? And that was really big for us as well. But I think what we found was that we were able to literally allow people to hear history speak and to touch history. Excuse me. And then after that, we were intentional to tell a different story each time.
Okay.
Right. And so
let's go back to the university. Your bosses and folks are like, hey, and about next year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember the feeling of what you felt, what you thought? You're coming off the high. You're probably still on the high. You're probably still way up Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, we're front page of the Oklahoman and all that, you know.
So the people who didn't care about you, back then they didn't want you.
Now you're hot. All over
There you go. So then, so now they're saying, come on.
Yeah.
It's not really a series yet because you did it one time.
Right. So the level of even university engagement grew. I'll give you a perfect example. So year one, it's we give them a campus tour, take them to lunch. We let Terrence Roberts get lectured. Then there's the deal. Year two, I want to tell the story of Claudette Colvin, right? She's Rosa Parks before Rosa Parks, but I want to tell the story with Claudette Colvin and Fred Gray, right? The attorney for Martin Luther King and for Rosa Parks. And so get a hold of both of them. And this year, the Thunder are playing a home game on that Sunday. Blake Griffin and the Clippers are in town.
Okay.
The Oklahoma City Thunder, the only team in the league that still has a prayer before tip-off. Maybe the Hornets still do it because they used to do it when they were here. The Thunder, the university somehow sets it up where the Thunder are having Fred Gray to come and lead the prayer before the Thunder game. ABC, primetime tip-off, right? So we're great seats. I've got some photos somewhere of Kevin Durant coming over to meet Fred Gray and Claudette Colvin pregame shoot around, right? This level of involvement, I mean, it jumped quickly.
Yeah.
Right? I think the Thunder even filmed something with Fred Gray, that they used down the road, but it grew quickly.
Yeah.
It grew very quickly. And what we realized was, maybe December, right? People were starting to blow us up with what's the date? Who is it?
When the tickets going to be available?
Can I get my tickets?
Because I noticed when I got here, I was like, man, I know this thing is coming up. Are they doing it? And then it's like,
it's crazy.
So I would get reminded, one of my friends, she'd be like, hey, tickets out.
Yeah.
I'd be like, they do this every time.
Yeah.
But the demand is there.
The demand was there. We built an audience by telling those stories. And again, there were stories that we all grew up learning about generationally, but we never thought we'd ever have the chance to truly interact with these people in real life. And so that was huge. But it's interesting how each one of those stories kind of almost intertwined and helped me with other stories. So we went from those two to John Carlos and Tommy Smith from the '68 Olympics, and just crazy, man. Some of the offstage experiences, just mind blowing. By the time they came, we had a whole press conference.
Wow!
Like that Monday morning got to the point where I just couldn't keep doing this station at this time, this day. I was wearing them out. So I just said, everybody show up at 10, and we walk in a room, and I mean, it's like post game after the and they just and with those two, they hadn't seen each other in probably about 25 years.
Wow.
Hadn't been around each other. In fact, when I got one, he told me, "You probably not gonna get the other one if he knows I'm coming." And there was a reunion. It's like they picked up like they hadn't missed a beat. From there, we went to Diane Nash, the mother of the Freedom Rides, and she started the lunch counter sit-ins in Nashville. Diane Nash is actually who helped me get Andrew Young. I wanted to get Andrew Young, and I just couldn't afford him. And I remember her saying that when she was going through one of the most difficult moments in her life, or Andy, as she calls him, Andy was a good friend, and we remained good friends. So I just called her, because I still hear from these people.
Yeah.
I called her, and I said, hey, quick question, is there any way you can talk him down? She said, well, did you call him? I said, yeah. She said, which number did you call? I'm like, well, which number do you have?
Right.
She's like, well, give me a couple minutes. And about an hour later, I get a fax comes through email. He's accepted the offer that we sent, and he was coming. Yeah.
I had a chance to listen to Brother Young.
Yeah.
Last summer, and he tell it like it is.
Oh my goodness.
Like a T.I. is.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, it is. I'm trying to be nice for the people.
Absolutely.
But what's fascinating is as you talk about this program, and you wanted them to hear their stories firsthand. When you talked about earlier your dad taking a step off the sidewalk, and you asked him why, I'm like, he explained something then that maybe that was a seed planted then that opened up conversations that led to, let's get people a chance to tell this story.
Absolutely.
In a market that they have not heard. And let's be frank, like in Oklahoma, a lot of things don't happen here.
Right.
And you're not from here. And another person who's not from here is bringing people something that they've wanted.
Yeah.
I'm going to pivot and sit on that for a second. There's this idea that here, that in Oklahoma, that people don't want it. They don't want things that they settle or just essentially that they don't want it, right?
Right.
They expect very little. But when you take the risk, you realize people actually want it.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do you continue to get to stay in the space of inspiration, motivation, and then not giving the noise so much attention to deliver people something you know in your heart that they want and deliver it to them and watch them show up?
I think what I did was, so my wife she has this saying of not majoring in the minors, keep the main thing, right? And for me, I stayed focused on the fact that as much as I wanted this place filled with people to learn, nobody was going to get more out of this experience than me, right? And so what would I want out of this experience? What stories would I want to hear? Who would I want to talk to? And even in the way in which we would kind of leak the announcement that it was coming on Facebook, right? And so that was, I think, at the center of everything that we did. I have 3 daughters, and I think that one of the greatest gifts that I've ever given them is History Speaks. When I kind of look back at it, there are no other little kids their age who can ever say that they met John Carlos, Tommy Smith, Andrew Young, Fred Gray, Claudette Colvin. Yeah. My kids have pictures, sitting down with Raymond Santana, the Central Park Five. Like, it'll make a whole lot more sense to them down the road as they understand what they were exposed to. But I think that it's so important that we kept telling responsible stories, that we did it in a way that was tasteful and empowering and inspiring. Like you said, some of the greatest strength in our history as a people comes on the heels of some of the darkest moments, right? One of my own personal heroes, we've never met, never will meet, Thurgood Marshall, right? I know he got his flaws and all that, but I just thought Brother Marshall was one of the dopest people to ever live. And for me, it was History Speaks was almost like this high of, I can never have him, but let me try to get close. Right. Let me try to, really, really dig into that. My undergrad degree is in history, so I'm a little bit of a nerd, anyway with that. But just, there were so many stories that I felt like people just they didn't know or they weren't exposed to, right? A big number again of people who supported History Speaks were people who grew up in
that time frame.
in what we would recognize, as the civil rights movement, bus boycott to King assassination era, and really a lot of those people, you could just tell.
And it's not a short program.
No. We would go.
It's a
2
Monday
hours.
evening. They just probably spent Sunday at church for 7 hours.
Absolutely.
And back the next day. But something you said makes me think about when you were talking about sports, and in the church where you had somebody to look up to that you wanted to aspire to be. I'm not sure you realize what you said when you related to your daughters. When you said that your daughters now have something to see.
Absolutely.
Right. They'll look back and realize like that was a moment I learned something from. Just from the outside.
Yeah.
Seeing these connections still show themselves in your life from experiences that you had in the developmental years with your parents. The conversation with your dad,
right? Your
mom saying, "Hey, when I have kids, I want to move up closer to my family,"
right?
Which led to all these things. And in my head, like, I could be wrong, that these experiences that the decisions that your parents made, all these are still connecting dots to what you're doing. And in that moment you said about your daughters, I was like, it is quite a possibility that you might be intentionally both and unintentionally giving what was given to you.
Yeah, I think it's in some ways, and I think my wife and I are really we try to be intentional about that. That we expose our daughters to as much as possible, right? It's always interesting when one of them will come home and say something like, "Hey, we learned about Diane Nash in school today, and I told everybody that I met Diane Nash, and they told me I was lying." And I showed them a picture of my phone, and they're like, "Well, how does that happen, right?"
My daddy,
or things like that, and that's really important to us because
actually, it wasn't her daddy, it was her mama.
Is it your mama, right? Really,
right?
Absolutely, and it's interesting because we want them to never lose sight of that historical connection as well. We are big believers in our girls learning our story and our girls understanding that your mama is great, but she comes from a long line of great women as well, and there are other women and men in society, and also that you have a responsibility. Right. You have a responsibility to go be great because that's just what we do. That's what's in us.
And I want you to see all,
absolutely. We set the bar high intentionally, and we help you to see again. It's just not just happening in our home. This is our expectation.
So you have the experience, and you're at Oklahoma Christian, and now you have a chance to be here at the University of Oklahoma in that capacity, which I am waiting for the next, I won't call it a unicorn, but waiting for the next thing that you come up with to do. How, in this new capacity, well, not new capacity, in this, just a new role, right? New role. What have you learned over the past, let's say 20 years?
Okay.
Let's just say the last 10. Let's say what have you learned the past 10 years?
Okay.
That you are hoping to influence in this era. Not so much because it's the role and the title, but in this era, right? In this era of your life, because there aren't many people that you can say that have done and had that experience. It's something special when you create something from scratch that has a long-term impression on people. Not many people can have that, say that, and you are a part of that. Now there's this, like, I've done that, I know I can do that again, but there's something else possibly coming. So how do you see this next era of this next chapter for you?
So I will tell you, so History Speaks ran for 10 years. Sell out from door to door, from start to finish. I own the rights to the series. There are a couple of things up the sleeve that are coming. I'm excited about this next chapter because I came here a little over a year ago to a blank canvas, literally, and having the flexibility and freedom to think and to dream and to program has been great. But I think that there will be some things that I've done that I'm going to continue to do. But there are some new avenues that I'm extremely excited about. One of the things about being here at the Price College of Business is that it provides a different brand, a different audience, a different conversation, right? And I'm excited about what unicorn rests at the intersection of Black business, culture, economic empowerment, right? And I think that there are some things that we're in the midst of working on now that I think have a chance to be just as big as something like History Speaks,
right.
As well. One of the things I love now is that because of the OU brand and because of the Price brand, I don't have to sell anybody on the validity of History Speaks. That used to frustrate me. I'll be honest with you, that a program that stellar, in my opinion, never had a corporate sponsor. And I'm like, all you gotta do is slap your name on it. I do everything. It's done deal.
I make it easy for you.
Make it easy for you, right? But I'm now positioned in front of people and corporations and companies that clamor for that type of programming, who would love to throw resources behind it. And then the flip side of that, kind of pressing pause there's this other part of the intersectionality that speaks to the real, true empowerment of students from underrepresented populations moving into C-suites in the business world. And that might excite me more than anything. To see a kid come here from Oklahoma City Public Schools. You give me 4 or 5 years with them, and now they're on the trajectory to being an executive at Shell or Conoco, whatever the case is. That's exciting because it's a different level, a different pocket in which we can really, really impact our community. But I'm excited. There's a couple things up the sleeve that are coming, and I'm just trying to be very intentional that we do it right. When I swing, I want to hit something.
But those experiences that you had prepare for the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
And from even my own experience as an entrepreneur, when those corporate sponsors don't sign on, you find a way to make it work.
Absolutely.
And so when you do have the opportunity to be in front of that audience, you are more than prepared because you could talk the language. Hey, the heavy lifting is already done. There's already a system in place. It's already there. All we have to do is find out if we align or not. And after that, it makes it easy. But it goes back to those experiences that you had that prepared for the moment that you can pull the thing off. And that's why, going back to you said about sponsorship and mentorship.
Oh, yeah.
It's when you get a chance to experience the grittiness, the hard work, because if you don't feel the pressure and the stress and all that, you're not going to know how far you can go with it. So now you have just a larger audience to do the thing that you already know to do. And again, you're in front of students. Now you are the mentor or sponsor for someone like yourself that was, I'm waiting my turn.
Right.
Well, I know I'm going to get my turn because Mr. Jones is going to give me my turn because you're replaying, you're giving back what was given to you.
I love being a sponsor for young brothers and sisters. I love it because I love watching people win. I love watching people take a step toward their dreams. a good friend and member of our advisory board here, Sharina Perry. I mean, she said something when we first met. She came and did a panel for me, and I'll never lose it. She says, I prayed to God that if you give it to me, I promise I'll do right with it. She said, so it is my belief that every door that I open, that I leave it open, right, for the next brother or sister to come in. And so that's been my prayer. Lord, if you give it to me, I'm going to do right with it, right? And leaving those doors open.
Stewardship.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's really, really, really important, but we've got to make sure that we never lose sight of that. Got to make sure that we never lose sight of the importance of making sure that we're speaking up and creating those opportunities.
Yeah, I just love that because, there's challenges everywhere you go. People often see in the big city, they believe that these conversations don't happen. Right. And they do.
Oh, yeah.
I could tell you that they are the same. I'm talking to several people I still maintain a relationship with Houston. It's the same thing. It's just a bigger city. So the fact that you're able to show students that what you're experiencing here is going to happen somewhere else. But here's the great value of here. You can actually take a risk here and win. Right. Or even if it falls short, the fall won't be as hard. Yeah. Right. If you have a chance to have someone guide you and mentor you and show you what you can do or what is possible, absolutely, it can happen right here to prepare you for another opportunity as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a safe landing spot, right? This is the time to try it. This is the time to pursue it, like you said, because if something doesn't go right, right, you have somebody who can say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and let's try this again. This is where we went wrong. Now, I think that's really, really important. I mean, even looking back at the History Speaks series, it's the reason why I won't sell myself cheap, right? Because I know what it was like to literally get it out of the mud, to go fundraise and to have to pull out of my own pocket and things of that nature, to not do this so you can do that, and so. And
not everybody that was, people who were given the opportunity can't relate to that, to a student that might be first generation or second generation or working 2 or 3 jobs to make it through to get their education. Like, not everybody can be that relatable. Right. Because now your conversation will be very similar.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, he or she relates to me.
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest lessons that I'm tasked with teaching students, and it's a task I put on myself, is to teach them how to invest in themselves. Right. At some point, this has got to mean something to you. Right. Right. What grunt work are you doing? What investment are you making? But yeah, that putting that series together. I used to do an annual civil rights movement to a spring break trip. Had the fun. I mean, those kinds of things where you knew I'm walking into this and I've got to figure this out. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things that prepare you for anything that happens in the corporate world.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I got one last question.
Okay.
Last question would be, if you were to ask why would your dad be proud of you?
Why would he be proud of me? I have no idea. No. I think that he was extremely proud when I stopped running from the call that God had on my life. So this is interesting. You kind of tapped on this a little bit earlier, and I told you that came down the road. It wasn't we're grooming him to preach, right? The public speaking and leadership, that was just who I was. Right. Never once did my dad ever say, hey, you really need to give this a shot. He never said that to me. He gives it a shot. I need to think about this. Never did. What happened was, over the years, out of necessity, you fill in here, you fill in there, and then I started getting invited places, right? I mean, I would be gone at least once a month.
We gonna pull an offering.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, no, I'm serious. I mean, I'm talking about like I'm in Detroit or Jackson, Mississippi, and I'm like, why are these people inviting me? I don't know if I'm that good, But for whatever reason, right? And I'll never forget, man, I was in Pontiac, Michigan. I finished preaching, and this guy, he had to be at least 65. Yeah. Came up, and I'm sitting there, I'm, sweating, kind of wiping my head off. And he said, man, I've been coming to this church for years, and if for whatever reason, the light went off today, and I'm ready to give my life to God, right? And I said to myself, I literally said out loud, I said, all right, Lord, I'm done running. I don't know what you're doing, but you got me.
Got you right? One.
And so, I found myself doing more of the quarterbacking anyway, for the church. And then as COVID started to set in, my dad's health and things of that nature, he expressed that he wanted to retire. And it was funny because some churches from some other areas had reached out, and he was like, you ain't gotta go, don't go nowhere. This is so. But I think he'd be proud of me because of who I am. I've never compromised who I am. I try to live in the all of me, right? I am all of a higher ed professional. I am all of a minister of the church, pastoring people. I am all of a dad. I am all of a husband. When I was coaching college ball, I was all of that, and I think he'd be proud of me just because I'm walking in what God has called me to walk in. Okay. And
I got two more.
Okay.
So why would your mom be proud of you?
Oh man, my mom would be proud of me. I think for the same reason. I think my mom would be proud of me because she was the one who put me in a lot of those spaces when I was a kid, to have to be the only one of me in the room, to have to navigate those spaces. She was the one who put me, in the pageants when I was younger and made me work on memorizing this and memorizing that. I think she'd be proud of me, for that. But also just, I think for being the family man that I am. My family, very close-knit family, and I think they'd just be proud. I hope they'd be proud of the work that I'm doing.
Why would your wife be proud of you?
Well, I mean, have you seen me? No, I'm just playing. I'm just playing. Jill's gonna kill me when she sees this. I think Jill will be proud of me because I've tried to be very intentional of ensuring that we always remember that our family is our first ministry. Even in my ordination service, I even told my children, I brought them up and told them in front of the entire church, I am your father before I am their preacher. And we've tried to live by that. We've done ministry together. It's not a deal like, oh, he's got this going on at the church. We are involved. The kids are involved. And when we need a break, we need a break. And I think just trying to be intentional about that. She has watched me through the good and the bad, the ups and the downs, whether it be in higher ed or in the church setting, and health issues, all of that. And the fact that I think nothing more than just being still standing. I think she'd be proud of me of the resilience that I've displayed.
Last question. Why are you proud of yourself?
Oh, man. Apollo, why am I proud? You know what? I'd say I'm proud of myself because that's a trick question. I'm proud of myself. Okay. I'm proud of myself because where I come from, I shouldn't be where I am. The odds were against me. I didn't come from a broken home or nothing like that, but I had every opportunity, like everybody else, to go the wrong way. I had every opportunity to take the shortcut. I had every opportunity to do something else. I've had every opportunity to compromise my character and be justified in doing so. I've had every opportunity to just do something and regret it later, right? But I think I'm most proud of myself because of the growth. I'm a different man at 41 than I was at 31 or 21. I'm proud of myself because I think my girls love me. You know, I think my girls actually like being around me, right? I'm proud of myself because, you know, I try to be a very present father and husband. I'm proud of myself because I try to be intentional that even at my church that they don't just see me as the preacher, but I'm a part of this congregation as well. Mm-hmm. I have members come in my home and eat and things of that nature. I'm not on a pedestal or anything like that. But I'm proud of myself because I've truly professionally got it out of the mud. Mm-hmm. In a space that's probably been one of the most difficult fields to navigate in this state in the last several years.
Yeah.
I can truly say that I've earned everything I got. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I'll be proud of myself.
Okay. Well, Brother Jones.
Brother Woods, you tried to pull it out of me, didn't you?
I appreciate you joining us on this episode of the Bigger Than Food podcast, man. Like I said, I want, and also the reason why I say I want people to talk more about who they are than what they do, because I think it's also good for you to hear it for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't spend enough time. As men, we spend a lot of time talking about like the things you have to do.
Absolutely.
And putting and often not reflecting on, man, I've actually come a long way. I can actually pat myself on the back, right? That I actually do good things, and I'm not defined by my shortcomings. So I definitely, what I learned the most from hearing you talk today is, when sharing your story today, it's was always this thread of connection to thinking about who's going to come behind me.
Absolutely.
Because as you're working on assignment, like there's a thing that you're going to do and you're going to move on. Mm-hmm. So you moved on from one role at another university. The impression is there.
Right.
So the expectation is there. So that legacy is going to be there for who knows, right? And even from the time I've walked the halls and been around, the impression is there, but you leaving this experience, this relatability back on somebody else to know this thing is possible. That we have to be very purposeful on how we care for the people because they deserve it and they need it.
Absolutely.
Right. The underdog deserves the attention. Like, let's not neglect. Let's try for the big thing. Let's shoot for the moon. Let's not think about what's not possible, what we can't do. Mm-hmm. Being willing to say, well, even if you don't believe it, I'm gonna make you believe it.
Facts. Because
I'm gonna do it.
Absolutely.
So I definitely appreciate you sharing that story with me today, brother.
And I appreciate you, my brother.
Get more insight on what you got going on. So do a favor for us. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Bigger Than Food. Turn on those notifications. Share this video with your friends. That helps us grow this channel. Brother Jones, if somebody wants to support you, how can they do that?
Oh, how can you support me? You can support me in a lot of ways. Okay. I think the most important way that you can support me is by supporting the people around you, supporting the generation behind us. I think that's really, really important. Find a young man or young woman a mentor. Spend some time with them. We'd love to have you drop by the church. You know, we're always out in the community. 1501 Northeast 36th Street, Eastside Church of Christ. We'd love to have you come and just be a part of our community there. But again, at the end of the day, just invest in somebody other than yourself.
Well, that's a great way to end the podcast. And like we always say, our mission is bigger than food, and be intentional with how you spend and support a local Black-owned business today. Thank you for joining the Bigger Than Food podcast. We hope you found inspiration in stories shared today. Remember, it's the courage to take action that drives real change in the world. Be sure to subscribe to the Bigger Than Food podcast for more conversations with movers and shakers who are shaping our tomorrow. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep